Hello, landlords. It's Ernie Garcia, landlord attorney, and it's the time of year when we talk about taxes. Let's get started. So many of you are experiencing an increase in the amount of the taxes that you will be assessed. And especially here in the Houston area, those tax bills are coming around, and we know that property values have gone up, and come next January, the tax man is coming for his due. So you have some considerations to make in order to maintain a level of profitability when it comes to your rent property. So there's essentially three questions that you are contemplating at this point. The first of which is, should I protest my taxes? Well, you may think, well, what's the benefit? What are the detriments, the pros and the cons to protesting your taxes? Well, if your taxes are up and your appraised value is up, you have the opportunity to go and contest that. In the state of Texas, you can go through a process where you submit your protest with your county and then submit evidence about the valuation and why you believe the county has mistakenly raised the value. Now you may ask yourself, well, how is this going to help me? Well, first of all, if it turns out that the county does nothing, you're certainly not harmed. You can always go every single year and protest an increase in the value of the property in question, which is inevitably going to raise your taxes. So the tax in the state of Texas is based on property value. And so if the county is saying those values have gone up, then your taxes will go up. And in your case, if you can convince them otherwise, well, then your taxes will go down and your profitability will go up, which is where you want things. So, you can't protest and the county says, well, we're just going to make them even higher now because you put us through all this. You have an absolute right to protest. And if it turns out you're justified in your argument, you might actually lower your tax burden. Now, some of you are thinking, well, isn't it good that the value of my property is rising? I mean, doesn't that overall improve my general wealth? If I've got 10 homes and altogether they're valued at $2.5 million, isn't that the goal? Isn't that what we're trying to do as real estate owners, is build wealth? Well, there's a difference between the appraised value that the county uses as a mechanism for assessing your taxes and the market value, which is whatever anybody is willing to pay at the time that you are willing to sell. And really, for practical purposes, that's the point at which you evaluate the value of your property. You may, from time to time, peek at the appraised value and want to make a determination as to, the valuation of your portfolio, for example. But if you're not using that toward a specific end, the number is less concrete than what the county says, especially if the county is providing you with an inflated number. So you can consider a high number when you're ready to sell, but if you are leasing, selling is not, really what you're in it for. You're not interested in a high number. And the truth is, the fact of a high appraised value doesn't necessarily affect the market value. If the market is hot, you're likely going to be able to sell above even what the county appraises. Or if the market is slowing down, as it appears to be now, you may actually sell for less than what the county has appraised. And if that's the case, it's a definite sign that your property has appraised at a value that's not connected to the reality of your property. Sometimes the numbers are way off, and if that's the case, you don't want it to be off in the wrong direction. You certainly don't want the number to be assessed too high, because then you're paying taxes unnecessarily. Here's the other thing. Once that tax rate is locked in for a given year, because you have a specific window in which you can protest, but once it's locked in, you're stuck with that number. And so if the rate goes up again the following year, you can contest that rate increase. But if you've never contested your tax rate, then every year you agree that what the county says is accurate, and you'll be unable to walk it back, at least not easily. Landlords, as always, we welcome you to follow us on our Instagram page. If you're not a member yet, join us on Facebook. And if you enjoy what you see here, give us a thumbs up. Click that like button. We enjoy that very much. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. So your next consideration is your rent amount. If you're between tenants, then your calculation is, if I raise the rent, does it match the current market value? So my appraised value is up. Does that mean that the market value is up? That's going to take some homework on your end. What are similar properties in your neighborhood renting for? Do you have access to that data? You might want to touch bases with a realtor who works in your area and have them give you some comparable data of other houses that are renting in your neighborhood. That's extremely useful for you. If you have access to online portals that will show rent values for properties in your area that match the specs of your home, that's helpful information as well. And if it turns out that your rent is well below the market, you have a consideration to make in terms of whether you should raise that rent. Additionally, if you've attempted to protest your taxes and been unsuccessful, then the need to raise your rent might also be a compelling factor in order for you to, again, maintain or restore profitability in your case. So find out whether it makes market sense. If that's the case and you are in between tenants, then it should be a pretty simple calculation. However, your final consideration has to do with whether or not you've got a current tenant in place and whether it makes sense for you to raise the rent on a current tenant. So naturally, if you are within a given term, if you signed a 12-month lease 4 months ago, you're locked into that rate for another 8 months. However, if you are coming to the conclusion of a lease term, you have some considerations to make. If that lease lapses into a month-to-month, you could potentially, with a 30-day notice, send a notice of a rent increase. The same terms otherwise of the rest of the lease would stick, but with a suitable notice, generally 30 days, with a suitable notice to your tenant, you can raise the rent to a higher rent amount. And if it makes sense for you to raise the rent on this particular tenant without causing the tenant to say, no thanks, rent's too high now, I'm out of here, you may successfully raise the amount of rent that you're getting paid from month to month, even on a lease that has now lapsed into a month-to-month tenancy. The question then would be, does it make sense to stay on a month-to-month tenancy, or can you lock this tenant in on a higher rent rate? Will the higher rent effectively kill a good relationship? If you've got a tenant who has been paying you rent, this is a serious question that you have to ask yourself. Will my idea to raise the rent in order to maintain profitability burn my bridge with a really great tenant? Now, if they're not so great, then maybe you use this as a mechanism to get that tenant out and get a new tenant in, also part of your calculation. If you have a relationship that you wouldn't mind ending, then maybe raise that rent up to a market level to make up for the additional taxes that you'll be paying, so that, again, you can maintain or restore profitability. In the state of Texas, this is something you have to consider every single year. If your taxes go up, what does it mean for you, and does it make sense for you to protest those taxes? And whether you are successful with your protest or not, if the market value for your property has in fact gone up, can you raise your rent? If you're in between tenants, definitely it's worth considering. But if you've got a current tenant on a month-to-month agreement, does it make sense to send notice that the rent will go up? These are considerations you want to keep in mind to maintain profitability, to make sure you are still getting the most out of your rental property. Until next time, landlords, happy leasing.